The young officer sat in the VA waiting room, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else, until an old man in a wheelchair rolled up and said, "You're holding your breath, son." Second Lieutenant Jake Rivera looked up to see a weathered face framed by silver hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The man wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans, but something about his posture, even seated, spoke of decades of discipline. A heavy knee brace caught the fluorescent light, and his calloused hands rested confidently on the wheelchair's armrests. "I'm Bill Harris," the older man said, extending his hand. "Staff Sergeant, retired. You?" "Jake Rivera, sir." The handshake was firm, steady. "Second Lieutenant." "None of that sir business, Jake. We're both patients here." Jake's eyes darted around the crowded waiting room, taking in the mix of veterans from different eras. Some wore baseball caps with unit patches. Others sat quietly with the same thousand-yard stare Jake recognized in his own mirror. The antiseptic smell mixed with industrial coffee created an oddly comforting atmosphere. A young woman in army fatigue sat near the window, absently rubbing a prosthetic leg. An older gentleman with a Desert Storm cap dozed in his chair, his service dog lying patiently at his feet. "First time?" Bill asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Third, actually." Jake's voice carried a slight tremor. "PTSD evaluation. Routine stuff." He paused, then added quietly, "Doc says I'm making progress, but some days it doesn't feel like it." Bill nodded knowingly. "What theater?" "Afghanistan. Helmand Province." Jake's jaw tightened slightly. "2 tours. First one was supposed to be routine. Second one." He trailed off, his hands instinctively moving to his chest, where his dog tags used to rest. "You? Vietnam. Mekong Delta, mostly." Bill's voice held no bitterness, just matter-of-fact acceptance. "Been coming here for physical therapy twice a week for 6 months now. This old knee finally decided it was done carrying me around." He patted the brace affectionately. "Shrapnel from '69. Took 53 years to catch up with me." Jake found himself studying Bill's face, noting the crow's feet that spoke of squinting into jungle sun, the way his shoulders remained squared despite decades of civilian life. "You seem, I don't know, at peace with it all." Bill chuckled softly. "Son, I've been angry, drunk, lost, and everything in between. Peace is something you work at every single day. Some days you win, some days you don't, but you keep showing up." As they talked, Jake noticed small details about Bill that didn't quite fit the typical retiree profile. The way his eyes constantly swept the room, cataloging exits and potential threats. How he positioned his wheelchair to face the main entrance. The faded tattoo on his forearm, barely visible but unmistakably military. When a maintenance worker dropped a tool in the hallway, Bill's hand instinctively moved toward his hip, a motion so quick Jake almost missed it. "You never really leave it behind, do you?" Jake observed. "The hypervigilance? The scanning?" "No, son. That's hardwired now. But I've learned to use it differently. Instead of looking for threats, I look for people who need help. Like you, sitting over there, holding your breath like the world was about to end." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. Was I that obvious? Only to someone who's been there. Your shoulders were up around your ears, jaw clenched tight, hands and fists. Classic signs of someone fighting a war inside their head. Bill's voice carried the patience of someone who had learned hard lessons. "You know what I used to think talking about it would make me weak? Took me about 40 years to figure out that keeping it all locked up was what was really killing me. My unit commander keeps saying the same thing. Get help, Rivera. Use the resources. But every time I try to talk about it." Jake's voice trailed off, his hands clenching into fists again. "What happened over there, Jake?" Bill asked gently, but with the authority of someone who had earned the right to ask such questions. Jake's breathing quickened. He looked toward the exit, then back at Bill. Something in the older man's steady gaze held him in place. You really want to know? I've got time, and I've heard worse than whatever you're carrying. Jake took a shaky breath. It was supposed to be a routine supply run. We'd done it dozens of times. Road was clear. Intel was good. Hell, we'd driven that same route 3 days earlier without incident. The question hung in the air. Jake's breathing quickened, and for a moment Bill thought the young man might bolt. Instead, Jake looked directly at him for the first time, seeing not just a fellow veteran, but someone who might actually understand. IED, roadside bomb. My convoy was heading back to base after a supply run. I was in the lead vehicle. Jake's voice became distant, clinical. Martinez was driving, good kid from El Paso, always talking about his daughter's soccer games, had pictures of her taped to his dashboard. She was maybe 8, missing her front teeth in every photo. Bill waited, understanding that silence was sometimes the most powerful tool in getting someone to open up. He'd learned this lesson the hard way, watching young soldiers clam up when pressed too hard for details. The blast flipped our truck. When I came to, Martinez was... Jake's voice broke. He was gone, just gone, and I couldn't get out. My leg was pinned under the dashboard. Couldn't reach Johnson in the back seat. Couldn't do anything but listen to him calling for his mom until the medics arrived. Jake's hands were trembling now. 15 minutes. 15 minutes of listening to him die while I was trapped there, helpless. How long were you stuck? Felt like hours. Probably 20 minutes before they got me out. But Johnson bled out before they could get to him. Kid was 19. 19 years old, Bill. Had a girlfriend back home. Talked about proposing when he got back stateside. Jake wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Sometimes I wake up and I can still hear his voice getting weaker and weaker. Bill reached out and placed a steady hand on Jake's shoulder. What do you think you should have done differently? Everything. I should have spotted the IED. Should have taken a different route. Should have insisted on more reconnaissance. Should have... Jake's voice rose slightly, then dropped to a whisper. Should have been a better leader. Bill leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a tone that Jake would later recognize as the voice of someone who had led men through hell and brought them home. Let me tell you something, Lieutenant. I lost 18 men in Vietnam. 18 good soldiers who trusted me to bring them home. For 40 years, I carried every single one of their names like stones in my chest. I'd wake up at 0300 hearing their voices, seeing their faces in my coffee, jumping at every car backfire. Jake looked up, startled by the raw honesty. Private Tommy Chen from San Francisco stepped on a mine during a patrol I ordered. Sergeant Mike O'Brien from Boston took a sniper's bullet meant for me. Corporal James Washington from Alabama died in a medevac helicopter after I couldn't get him out fast enough. Bill's voice remained steady, but Jake could see the weight of each name. For decades, I replayed every decision, every order, every moment where I thought I could have done something different. But you know what I finally learned? Those men didn't die because I failed them. They died because war is hell, and sometimes hell wins around. But they lived because of the decisions I made, the training I gave them, the leadership I provided. Martinez and Johnson. They got to serve alongside someone who cared enough to carry their memory. That's not weakness, son. That's love. Bill's eyes held a depth that spoke of decades of hard-won wisdom. You think Martinez would want you to stop living because he couldn't? You think Johnson would want you to waste the life he died protecting? The question hit Jake like a physical blow. For the first time in months, he felt something crack open inside his chest. Not breaking, but expanding. I keep thinking about Martinez's daughter. She's probably in high school now. Does she even remember her dad? She remembers him because of you, because you survived to tell his story, because you cared enough to carry his memory forward. Bill's voice softened. That's what we do, Jake. We become the keepers of their stories. We make sure they're not forgotten. Jake realized he was crying, not the desperate, silent tears he'd shed alone in his barracks, but the kind of tears that wash clean. How do you do it? How do you keep going when everything feels so heavy? Bill smiled, and for the first time, Jake saw not just the old man in the wheelchair, but the leader who had brought soldiers home from an impossible war. You find your purpose beyond the uniform. You help other people find theirs. You tell the stories that need telling. And you never ever let the darkness convince you that the light isn't worth fighting for. I used to love leading soldiers, Jake said quietly. Now I can't even lead myself to the mess hall some days. That's okay. Healing isn't linear, son. Some days you'll feel strong enough to carry the world. Other days you'll need someone else to carry you. The trick is learning to accept both. Rivera, Jacob? A nurse called from the intake desk. Jake stood, steadier than he had in months. That's me. Hey, Jake, Bill called as the young man walked toward the desk. Same time Thursday? Jake turned back, and Bill saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there an hour ago. Hope. Yeah, Bill. Same time Thursday. As Jake disappeared into the treatment area, Bill sat quietly in his wheelchair, watching the constant flow of veterans through the waiting room. Each one carried their own invisible wounds, their own stories of sacrifice and survival. Some, like Jake, just needed someone to remind them that healing wasn't the same as forgetting. He thought about the young soldiers he'd mentored in Vietnam, the ones who'd made it home and the ones who hadn't. He thought about the decades of silence that had nearly consumed him and the slow, painful process of learning to live with ghosts. Bill checked his watch. His physical therapy appointment was in 20 minutes, but he had time for one more cup of terrible VA coffee. As he wheeled toward the machine, he noticed another young veteran sitting alone, staring at his hands with the same desperate emptiness Jake had shown. Bill Harris had found his purpose beyond the uniform, and it was just getting started. Every day, veterans like Bill Harris sit in VA waiting rooms, community centers, and coffee shops across America. They carry decades of experience in leadership, resilience, and healing that could change lives. If only we took the time to listen. Their wisdom, earned through sacrifice and service, often goes unshared, yet it holds the power to guide the next generation through their darkest moments. If you found Bill and Jake's story meaningful and want to hear more about the unsung heroes who've served our country and continue serving their communities, hit that like button and subscribe to Echo Bravo. These veterans have incredible stories of courage, healing, and hope to share, and every subscription helps us continue bringing their experiences to light. What mentors or quiet heroes have made a difference in your life? Have you encountered veterans in your community who've shared their wisdom with you? Let us know in the comments below. Their stories deserve to be told too.